In 1996, a jogger moving along the shoreline spots a strange board game half buried in the sand. Curious, he takes it home and gives it to his son, Alex Vreek. Alex isn't impressed, he's more into video games than old-fashioned board games. That night, however, something unusual happens. The game mysteriously transforms itself into a video game cartridge. Intrigued, Alex inserts it into his console. The moment he begins playing, a burst of green light fills his bedroom, and he vanishes without a trace. 2 decades later, we're introduced to Spencer Gilpin, an anxious and academically gifted teenager who feels completely out of place in the real world. He reconnects briefly with his childhood friend Anthony, Fridge, Johnson outside Spencer's house, giving him an essay he secretly wrote for him. Their friendship is clearly strained, and things feel different between them. Not long after, Spencer is confronted by the now reclusive Mr. Vreek, Alex's father, who has withdrawn from society since his son's disappearance. The encounter leaves Spencer shaken. At school, Bethany Walker, obsessed with social media and her image, is caught video chatting during a quiz and earns herself detention. Meanwhile, shy and sharp-tongued Martha Capley refuses to participate in gym class, openly questioning its purpose and unintentionally insulting the teacher, also landing her in detention. Spencer and Fridge join them there after the school discovers Fridge has been submitting Spencer's work as his own. Principal Bentley assigns the 4 teens a dull punishment: cleaning out an old storage room and removing staples from outdated magazines. While sorting through the clutter, they stumble upon an old video game console with a strange cartridge labeled Jumanji. Curious and bored, they decide to give it a try. After selecting their in-game avatars, they are suddenly sucked into the world of the game. Spencer transforms into Dr. Smolder Bravestone, a confident and muscular adventurer. Fridge becomes Franklin Moose Finbar, a short zoologist with a backpack full of equipment, much to Fridge's frustration. Martha turns into Ruby Roundhouse, a fierce martial artist, and Bethany is shocked to discover she's now Professor Shelley Oberon, a middle-aged male cartographer. Panic sets in as they realize they are physically inside the game. Their confusion is cut short when a hippo attacks, swallowing Bethany whole. Moments later, she reappears unharmed, and they begin to understand the rules. They each have 3 lives, shown as markings on their wrists. Soon, they encounter Nigel, a non-playable character who explains their mission. Years ago, Dr. Bravestone's rival, Russell Van Pelt, stole a powerful jewel known as the Jaguar's Eye from a massive jungle statue. With it, he gained control over the wildlife and plunged Jumanji into chaos. The teens must return the jewel to its rightful place to lift the curse and escape the game. Exploring their new abilities, Spencer discovers his avatar possesses immense strength, speed, and climbing skills, with no listed weaknesses. Ruby is a skilled fighter but vulnerable to venom. Moose's strengths seem limited, and one of his surprising weaknesses is cake. Shelley contributes knowledge in cartography and archaeology. They also find a damaged map that will guide them to the Jaguar statue if they can locate the missing piece. Their journey quickly becomes dangerous when motorcycle-riding henchmen chase them across the jungle. Fleeing through treacherous terrain, they leap off a waterfall to escape. Martha is struck during the fall and loses a life but respawns shortly after, confirming the 3-life system. Tensions rise between Spencer and Fridge as old resentments surface. Fridge admits he's been trying to distance himself from Spencer for years. In a moment of anger, he shoves Spencer off a cliff, costing him one of his lives. Spencer respawns and retaliates before the girls intervene and refocus the group on their mission. Arriving at a bustling marketplace, they search for the missing map piece. Fridge accidentally eats a slice of cake and instantly explodes, another weakness confirmed. After respawning, they're approached by a child who leads them to a remote hut. Inside a container rests a dangerous black mamba snake. Spencer carefully retrieves it while Fridge removes its fangs, bringing them one step closer to completing their quest. While exploring, Bethany discovers a small elephant-shaped totem, along with a cryptic message that reads, "When you find me, begin the climb." Before they can fully process it, Russell Van Pelt and his armed riders track them down. Spencer, now fully embracing his role as Dr. Bravestone, uses his enhanced strength and combat skills to knock the henchmen aside with ease, sending them flying through the jungle. Just as things grow chaotic, they're rescued by another in-game avatar, Jefferson Seaplane McDonough, a rugged pilot. He quickly reveals that his real name is Alex. He guides them to safety and helps them regroup. After managing to reclaim the jewel from Van Pelt, Alex takes the group to a hidden treehouse that once belonged to Alan Parrish. There, he mixes drinks for everyone, and Fridge overindulges, quickly feeling the effects. During their downtime, Alex explains that he's been trapped in the game for months, unable to reach the transportation shed needed to escape. As they talk, Alex casually drops 90s slang into conversation, which slowly makes the others realize the truth. He's Alex Vreek, the boy who vanished decades ago. To him, it's only been months, but in the real world, 20 years have passed. The weight of that realization hits him hard. To retrieve the vehicle they need, the group decides someone must distract the guards. Bethany coaches Martha on how to flirt, hoping she can buy them time. Martha's attempt at charm doesn't go smoothly, but she suddenly remembers one of her character's abilities: dance fighting. Music blasts from a nearby boombox, and Martha launches into a high-energy combat routine, effortlessly defeating the guards with rhythmic martial arts moves. The group rushes into the shed and secures a helicopter. Alex hesitates. He's down to his final life and terrified of losing it. The others encourage him, reminding him that they're in this together. He finds his courage, and they lift off just as Van Pelt's forces close in. Their escape quickly turns wild as a herd of albino rhinos charges beneath them. The helicopter begins to lose altitude. Spencer climbs onto the exterior to repair the damage midair, but in the chaos, Fridge drops the Jaguar's eye. The rhinos circle the jewel protectively. Thinking fast, Spencer shoves Fridge out of the helicopter to distract the animals. Fridge is trampled but respawns shortly after, allowing Alex to swoop in so they can recover the jewel. After landing, Alex is suddenly stung by a mosquito. His health rapidly declines and he begins to fade. Bethany performs CPR, reviving him, but in doing so, she sacrifices one of her own lives to save his. With emotions running high, Spencer opens up to Martha, admitting his fears and insecurities. Martha reassures him, and the two share an awkward but heartfelt first kiss. Finally, they reach the towering jaguar statue, guarded by prowling jaguars. Spencer is attacked and mauled, leaving him with only one life remaining. Overwhelmed with fear, he confesses to Fridge how scared he truly is. Fridge, now more supportive than ever, urges him to believe in himself. Van Pelt and his men arrive for one last showdown. Using teamwork and each of their unique abilities, the group battles the villains. An elephant charges into the scene, and Fridge cleverly uses it to gain higher ground. Martha takes the jewel while Spencer climbs the statue. She becomes surrounded by snakes as Van Pelt closes in. Realizing venom is her weakness, and also a way to respond strategically, Martha deliberately steps on a snake, allowing it to bite her. As she falls, she tosses the jewel to Spencer. Spencer places the jaguar's eye back into its rightful spot atop the statue. Together, the five shout Jumanji. The curse lifts, the jungle brightens, and Van Pelt disintegrates into dust. Nigel reappears to congratulate them, shaking each of their hands as the world begins to fade. In an instant, the four teens find themselves back in detention, the game console sitting silently nearby. Alex, however, is nowhere in sight. As they leave school together, now true friends, they pass by the Vreek house. It's no longer abandoned or crumbling, but decorated warmly for Christmas. Mr. Vreek steps outside, greeted by his granddaughter. Moments later, a grown-up Alex arrives. He explains that when the game ended, he was returned to 1996, the exact moment he first began playing. He was able to grow up normally, build a life, and start a family. He even named his eldest daughter Bethany, in honor of the girl who saved him. Time moves forward. Spencer, Fridge, Martha, and Bethany head off to college, but remain close through group chats and plans to reunite in Brantford during the holidays. However, Spencer struggles the most with returning to his ordinary life. In New York, he has trouble adjusting to school and barely scrapes by at his retail job. His insecurities strain his relationship with Martha, eventually leading to their breakup. Back home, Spencer spends time with his mother and his grandfather, Eddie. One evening, he opens up to Eddie about his friends, the pressures he feels, and how lost he's been lately, unsure of where he fits in the real world without the confidence he once had inside the game. Late that night, Spencer lies awake, thinking about the confidence and purpose he once felt inside Jumanji. Unable to shake the feeling, he heads down to the basement and pulls out the old console he secretly kept, along with the cracked and malfunctioning game cartridge. He begins tinkering with it, determined to fix it. The following morning, Fridge, Martha, and Bethany meet for their planned brunch at a local restaurant called Norris. At the same time, Spencer's grandfather, Eddie, receives an unexpected visit from his former business partner, Milo Walker. The reunion is tense. Eddie still harbors resentment after Milo sold their once shared restaurant, which ultimately caused a falling out between them. When Spencer doesn't show up for brunch and stops responding to messages, the three friends grow worried and head to his house. Eddie recognizes Fridge from years ago and lets them inside. Fridge also remembers Milo from the restaurant's earlier days, back when it used to be called Milo and Eddie's before ownership changed hands. As they search the house for Spencer, an all-too-familiar sound echoes from the basement, the steady, ominous drumbeat of Jumanji. Fearful of what it means, they rush downstairs and discover the console fully reassembled. Realization dawns on them. Spencer has gone back into the game alone. Before they can decide what to do, the console activates and begins pulling them in. At the last second, Bethany is left behind as the others are sucked into the game. Martha lands back in the jungle as Ruby Roundhouse. She quickly finds Dr. Smolder Bravestone and assumes it's Spencer, but soon realizes the avatar is being controlled by Eddie. Milo has entered the game as Moose Finbar, while Fridge is horrified to discover he's now Professor Shelley Oberon. Martha and Fridge struggle to explain to Eddie and Milo that they are trapped inside a video game world with rules, lives, and weaknesses. Chaos erupts almost immediately. Martha saves Eddie from being devoured by a hippo, but while Fridge attempts to explain the concept of extra lives, he's swallowed by a massive snake, losing one life in the process. They spot a plane overhead and move toward it, hoping for answers. Nigel Billingsley soon appears to deliver their new mission. This time, a ruthless warlord named Jurgen the Brutal has stolen the Falcon Jewel, an artifact that sustains life across Jumanji. Without it, the land has fallen into drought. Jurgen also happens to be responsible for the death of Dr. Bravestone's parents. Their objective: retrieve the jewel and lift it to the sunlight to restore balance. Nigel warns them ominously that survival is not guaranteed for everyone this time. Dropped into a vast desert, the group reviews their updated abilities. Moose now has enhanced linguistic skills, Ruby gains mastery with nunchucks, and Bravestone discovers his new weakness is something cryptically labeled Switchblade. Fridge complains loudly that Shelley still lacks any impressive combat talents. While crossing the desert, they encounter an ostrich. Milo uses Moose's zoology knowledge to analyze it, but takes too long to warn the others that ostriches in groups are aggressive. Eddie learns this the hard way when one attacks him. Moments later, a full herd charges toward them. They scramble onto nearby ATVs to escape. In a bold maneuver, Eddie drives them off a cliff to evade the birds, barely making it across to safety. Following Nigel's guidance, they arrive at an oasis where they must obtain a rare fruit known as the Jumanji berry. There, they spot Jurgen and his soldiers guarding the Falcon Jewel. A nimble thief named Ming Fleetfoot attempts to steal the key to the jewel, but is caught. Jurgen hurls an axe, eliminating her instantly. The group quickly realizes the fallen thief was actually Spencer, inhabiting a brand new avatar. They regroup with him outside the oasis. Spencer admits he returned to the game because he missed feeling brave and capable, something he hasn't felt in the real world. Before they can move forward, they're confronted by a mysterious woman revealed to be a former love interest of Bravestone. She provides clues about the berry's location, but warns them about her dangerous husband, known only as Switchblade. Martha and Fridge venture off to retrieve the fruit while Eddie revels in Bravestone's strength, taking down waves of enemies with surprising enthusiasm. Martha reaches the glowing tree bearing the berry, but slips into a shimmering pool beneath it. When Fridge pulls her out, they realize they've switched bodies. Fridge, temporarily in Ruby's form, marvels at her abilities and tests out her fighting skills, until he accidentally falls into the pool again, reversing the switch. After securing the berry, they regroup with Eddie, only to be ambushed by Switchblade and his men. Using camels that Milo manages to communicate with, they escape the oasis with the berry in hand. But just as they gain some distance, Switchblade fires a rocket that strikes near them, blasting the entire team and costing each of them another precious life. Back in the real world, Bethany refuses to give up. She tracks down Alex Vreek, hoping he might know a way to re-enter the game and help the others. Inside Jumanji, the group presses forward, though tension between Eddie and Milo continues to boil over. Their arguing escalates until Eddie, using Bravestone's immense strength, punches Milo so hard he slams into a rock and is crushed, costing him a life and leaving him with only one remaining. The gravity of that moment hangs over them as they move on. Their path leads to a series of massive, rotating rope bridges suspended over a deep ravine. After carefully studying the rhythm of the spinning platforms, they begin leaping from one to another. Midway across, a swarm of aggressive mandrills attacks. In the chaos, Martha is knocked off a bridge while the others barely manage to reach stable ground. Eddie slices through a support rope, sending several mandrills plummeting below. Even after making it across, the group finds themselves surrounded until help arrives. Alex swoops in piloting a plane as Jefferson, Seaplane McDonough, accompanied by Bethany, who has returned to the game as a black horse named Cyclone. They scare off the mandrills and deliver warm clothing to help the group survive the colder climate ahead. With a rare quiet moment, Eddie and Milo finally speak honestly. Milo confesses he came back into Eddie's life because he's been diagnosed with a serious illness and doesn't have much time left. The revelation softens Eddie, and the two reconcile after years of resentment. Spencer witnesses this and feels inspired by their renewed friendship. Soon after, Fridge accidentally tumbles down a snowy hill, discovering a glowing river, the same enchanted water that previously swapped bodies. Realizing its potential, Spencer, Fridge, Bethany, Eddie, and Milo all jump in. The magical reset restores Spencer, Fridge, and Bethany to their original avatars, Bravestone, Moose, and Shelley, while Eddie becomes Ming Fleetfoot and Milo returns as Cyclone the horse. Their regrouping is cut short when Jurgen's soldiers capture Eddie and Milo. The remaining team tracks the henchmen to Jurgen's icy mountain fortress. To infiltrate the stronghold, Fridge and Bethany pose as the legendary brothers Kabak, figures Jurgen greatly admires. Meanwhile, Spencer, Martha, and Alex search for another way inside. During the mission, Spencer and Martha finally address their strained relationship. Spencer admits he believed Martha's life was perfect based on her social media posts and thought she'd be better off without him. Martha reassures him that appearances can be deceiving and that she struggled too. Alex attempts to free Milo but triggers multiple traps, losing 2 lives in the process before finally succeeding. Meanwhile, Jurgen grows suspicious when he asks Fridge and Bethany about their sister, whom he expects to marry. Martha arrives, pretending to be the sister, but the ruse collapses when Jurgen's men announce the real brothers Kabak are on their way. Fridge quickly pulls a boombox from his pack, blasting music so Martha can activate Ruby's dance-fighting ability. She launches into a choreographed combat sequence, defeating waves of henchmen in rhythmic style. Jurgen flees aboard his massive Zeppelin with the Falcon Jewel. Spencer chases him on board, confronting the warlord in a brutal fight. Using the power of the Jumanji berry, Spencer weakens Jurgen just as the Zeppelin is struck and begins to crash. In a final move, Spencer tackles Jurgen, sending him falling from the airship. Below, Eddie rides atop Milo, revealing that Cyclone can fly. Spencer tosses the jewel to Eddie, who soars upward and lifts it toward the sun. Together, the group shouts Jumanji. The drought lifts, the land flourishes once more, and balance is restored. Nigel appears to congratulate them on completing the quest. As the portal home opens, Milo makes a surprising decision. He chooses to remain in Jumanji as Cyclone, where he can live freely without the burden of his illness. Eddie shares an emotional goodbye with his longtime friend before returning to the real world with the others. They reappear in Spencer's basement. Soon after, Mrs. Gilpin finds Spencer and Eddie bonding over the console, unaware of the adventure they've just survived. Later, the group gathers at Norris. Eddie reconnects with the restaurant's manager, Nora Shepard, who once knew him years ago. Channeling Bravestone's signature confidence and intensity, Eddie impresses her enough to secure a new role working alongside her. Spencer promises to stay connected with his friends and not retreat into isolation again. The group agrees to remain closer than ever, but one final twist awaits. A heater repairman arrives at Spencer's house and wanders into the basement. He spots the Jumanji console, curiously examining it, and touches it. Cut to outside Norris, where chaos erupts as a herd of ostriches stampedes through the streets, signaling that the game's dangers may not be confined to the console anymore. Analysis: there's something strangely powerful about wanting to escape your own life. What if the version of you inside a video game felt stronger, braver, more confident than the real you? That's the emotional core of Jumanji. The next level, and it's exactly why this sequel hits harder than most people expected. Jumanji, the next level isn't just another return to a dangerous fantasy world. It's not just bigger action, louder comedy, or crazier set pieces. This time, the story flips the entire concept on its head, because the real twist isn't the jungle, it's identity. In the first modern Jumanji film, we watched insecure teenagers become powerful avatars and discover confidence they never knew they had. But here's the question this sequel dares to ask. What happens when you leave the game and you don't feel powerful anymore? Spencer doesn't miss the adventure. He misses who he was inside the game, and that's where everything spirals. This time, the body swaps aren't just funny, they're chaotic. Grandfathers get trapped in superhero bodies. Old friends with decades of unresolved tension are forced to work together inside a digital survival world. And suddenly, Jumanji becomes more than a game again. It becomes therapy. It becomes redemption. It becomes a second chance. What makes this chapter of the franchise stand out is how cleverly it disguises emotional vulnerability inside blockbuster spectacle. On the surface, you're getting desert chases, snow-covered mountains, brutal villains, and massive action sequences. But underneath, it's a story about aging, about insecurity, about fearing that your best version only exists in the past. And that's what makes this sequel surprisingly powerful. So in this breakdown, we're not just revisiting Jumanji. We're diving into why this installment feels bigger, not just in scale, but in emotional weight. Because sometimes leveling up isn't about becoming stronger. It's about realizing you were never weak to begin with. Before we dive deeper into the chaos, let's set the stage. Jumanji. The next level arrived in 2019, not just as a sequel, but as a direct continuation of the modern Jumanji revival that surprised everyone 2 years earlier. Jumanji. The next level takes everything that worked before, the humor, the adventure, the body swap madness, and expands the world in ways we didn't see coming. This isn't just a jungle anymore. The game evolves. Genre-wise, the film blends high-stakes adventure, fantasy world building, and character-driven comedy. But underneath the explosions and punchlines, there's something more grounded, a story about insecurity, generational conflict, and second chances. The setting moves between the real world, where life feels messy, uncertain, and uncomfortable, and the digital world of Jumanji, which is now bigger and more dangerous than ever. We're talking scorching deserts, frozen mountain peaks, ancient fortresses, new enemies, higher risks. And here's the spoiler-free premise. Spencer, struggling to find his confidence in college, secretly repairs the broken Jumanji game. He misses who he was inside it, the fearless Dr. Smolder Bravestone. But when he goes back in, something malfunctions. The game glitches. Instead of the same smooth team dynamic, new players are pulled in unexpectedly, including people who barely understand what a video game even is. Suddenly, the mission isn't just about saving Jumanji again. It's about surviving inside a system that's completely out of control, and that shift changes everything. Because this time, the characters don't just know the rules. The rules are changing. On the surface, Jumanji, the next level looks like pure entertainment, big action, big laughs, bigger explosions. But if you look closer, this film is doing something far more interesting beneath all that spectacle. Jumanji, the next level blends adventure, fantasy, and comedy, but its real power comes from its themes. Let's break that down. First, identity. Spencer doesn't go back into Jumanji because he misses the danger. He goes back because he misses feeling confident. Inside the game, he was fearless, respected, strong. In real life, he feels small again. That contrast drives the entire story. Then there's the theme of aging and regret. Eddie and Milo aren't just there for comic relief. They represent something deeper, unfinished business, pride, lost time. When they're thrown into powerful avatars, it forces them to confront who they were and who they've become. The movie cleverly uses comedy to explore vulnerability. You're laughing at the body swap chaos, but underneath it, there's a quiet question. Is your best version behind you or still ahead? Emotionally, the tone shifts between loud and reflective. It's fast-paced and funny, but it never completely abandons its heart. That's why it works for multiple generations. Kids see adventure, teens see insecurity. Adults see regret, older viewers see second chances, and that generational layering is intentional. This isn't just a fantasy survival game anymore. It's a story about how different ages view strength differently. For the teenagers, strength is confidence. For the older characters, strength is reconciliation. And by the end, the film suggests something powerful. Strength isn't about muscles, avatars, or superpowers. It's about self-acceptance. That's what gives this sequel more depth than most people expected, and why it resonates beyond just being another adventure comedy. All right, now it's time to step back into the game. And this time, nothing goes according to plan. Jumanji, the next level, opens with Spencer struggling in the real world. College isn't what he imagined. He feels disconnected from his friends, uncertain, small again, and that's the key. He doesn't miss the adventure of Jumanji. He misses who he was inside it, so he makes a dangerous decision. He repairs the broken game console. But when his friends show up to check on him, they realize he's gone, and before they can stop it, the game activates again. Here's where everything twists. The wrong people get pulled in. Instead of the same character lineup from before, the system glitches. Spencer's grandfather Eddie and Eddie's estranged former best friend Milo are sucked into the game too. Inside Jumanji, the chaos is immediate. Eddie ends up in the body of Dr. Smolder Bravestone. Milo becomes the small but brilliant zoologist Mouse Finbar. Fridge and Martha land in unexpected avatars. And Spencer. He's missing. The environment has changed too. The lush jungle is no longer the only battlefield. Now there are brutal deserts, sandstorms, towering cliffs, frozen mountains. The game has leveled up. The mission seems simple on the surface. Retrieve a powerful stolen jewel and return it to its rightful place to save Jumanji from a ruthless warlord. But the real mission? Find Spencer. As they journey across deadly terrain, escaping bandits, surviving ostrich chases, navigating collapsing bridges, they finally discover Spencer hiding in plain sight. And here's the emotional twist. He didn't choose the strong avatar this time. He chose a weaker one, because deep down, he doesn't believe he deserves to be the hero anymore. That changes the dynamic completely. Now the team isn't just fighting to win the game, they're fighting to remind Spencer who he really is. The final act builds toward a massive confrontation with the villain guarding the jewel. Sacrifices are made, trust is tested. And friendships, both young and old, are forced to confront the truth. By the time they reach the final battle, it's no longer just about saving Jumanji. It's about reclaiming confidence, resolving decades-old grudges. And realizing that strength was never about the avatar. It was always about the player. Let's talk about that ending, because on the surface it looks like a typical victory. The villain is defeated. The magical jewel is restored. Jumanji is saved again. But if you really pay attention, Jumanji, the next level ends on something much deeper than just another win. Jumanji, the next level isn't about beating the game. It's about choosing who you want to be when the game is over. In the final confrontation, the team works together to defeat Jurgen and return the Falcon Jewel to its rightful place. The world stabilizes, the chaos stops. But the emotional climax doesn't belong to the teenagers. It belongs to Milo. Earlier in the story, we learn something subtle but powerful. Milo is terminally ill in the real world. He doesn't have much time left. Inside Jumanji, though, he's energetic, strong, capable, alive in a way he hasn't felt in years. So when the opportunity arises to stay behind in the game, to merge with the winged horse creature and remain in this world permanently, he chooses it. And that choice is symbolic. He's not escaping death. He's embracing freedom. For Eddie, this moment is heartbreaking. Decades of pride and stubbornness dissolve in seconds. The two old friends reconcile, finally saying the things they should have said years ago. It's a goodbye, but it's also closure. Meanwhile, Spencer's arc quietly resolves too. He entered the game believing his confidence only existed inside an avatar. He leaves understanding that bravery was never coded into a character. It was always his. And then comes the mid-credits twist. Back in the real world, the repaired game begins to glitch again. Animals appear where they shouldn't. The boundaries between game and reality start to blur, and that final tease raises a chilling possibility. What if Jumanji is no longer contained? What if the next level isn't inside the game at all? The ending works because it balances spectacle with emotion. Yes, the heroes win, but more importantly, they grow. And in a movie about leveling up, the most powerful upgrade isn't strength, it's acceptance. Now here's where Jumanji, the next level, becomes more interesting than it first appears. Because beneath the action and comedy, the movie is quietly planting meaning everywhere. Jumanji, the next level, may look like a fast-paced adventure, but it's layered with small details that reflect the characters' inner struggles. Let's start with the avatars. In the first film, the characters' avatars were ironic opposites of who they were in real life. But this time, the avatar choices feel intentional, almost psychological. Spencer chooses a weaker character. That's not random. It reflects how he sees himself at that moment. Smaller, less confident, less worthy of being the hero. The game doesn't just assign roles, it mirrors insecurity. Then there's the shift in environment. The jungle is no longer the primary setting. Instead, we get wide, empty deserts and freezing mountains. The desert especially feels symbolic. It's isolating, harsh, vast. There's nowhere to hide. And that mirrors Spencer's emotional state at the start of the film, alone, uncertain, exposed. Now look at Eddie and Milo. In the real world, they're elderly, slower, physically limited, but inside the game, they inhabit powerful bodies. That contrast isn't just played for laughs. It's a metaphor for how identity doesn't expire with age. Strength isn't something you lose, it's something you redefine. And then there's Jurgen's fortress. Cold, mechanical, rigid. Unlike the organic chaos of the jungle, his stronghold feels lifeless, almost emotionally frozen. It represents control without connection, power without heart. Even the broken bridge sequence carries symbolism. To move forward, the team literally has to trust each other and let go of fear. It's a visual metaphor for what each character is going through internally. What makes all of this effective is that none of it is forced. The film never pauses to explain its symbolism. It just lets the visuals, the setting, and the character choices quietly speak. And that's why, on rewatch, the movie feels deeper than a typical adventure sequel. Because underneath the spectacle, Jumanji isn't just about surviving a game. It's about confronting how you see yourself, and whether you're brave enough to change that. Now let's go behind the scenes, because the making of Jumanji. The next level is almost as impressive as the adventure itself. Jumanji, the next level, didn't just raise the stakes in the story. It raised the challenge level for the actors. This sequel introduced a complex body swap twist. That meant the cast wasn't just playing their established avatars anymore. They were playing other characters trapped inside those avatars. Think about that for a second. Dwayne Johnson wasn't just playing Dr. Smolder Bravestone. He was playing Danny DeVito inside Bravestone's body. That required intense preparation. Johnson reportedly studied DeVito's speech patterns, posture, and rhythm to capture the essence of an elderly, stubborn grandfather inside a muscular action hero. Kevin Hart had to channel a completely different energy as well, embodying the calm, thoughtful personality of Milo instead of his usual fast-talking intensity. It wasn't just comedy, it was performance precision. And much of the humor came from how accurately they mimicked the original characters. Then, there's the scale of production. The film expanded beyond the jungle to deserts and snowy mountain environments. Large portions were filmed on location to give the adventure a more grounded, epic feel. The ostrich chase sequence, that wasn't just CGI chaos. It required carefully coordinated stunt work, green screen blending, and extensive choreography to make it feel wild but believable. There were also moments of improvisation throughout the film. The cast's chemistry allowed for spontaneous reactions that made the body swap humor feel natural instead of scripted. And here's an interesting detail. The sequel was fast-tracked after the success of the previous film. The studio knew they had momentum, and they moved quickly to keep the energy alive. But instead of repeating the formula, they leaned harder into character-driven comedy and emotional layers. That decision is what separates this movie from being just another franchise extension. Behind the explosions and visual effects was something more complicated. Actors, playing avatars, playing different personalities. And somehow, it works. Because the real magic of this film wasn't just the world building. It was watching performers stretch beyond their usual personas, proving that even in a blockbuster adventure, craft still matters. Every sequel lives in comparison. And Jumanji. The next level had a tough challenge from the start. It had to prove it wasn't just repeating the formula. Jumanji: The Next Level follows directly after Jumanji, Welcome to the Jungle, a movie that surprised audiences by being far better than anyone expected. So how does it stack up? First, scale. The original modern Jumanji focused heavily on the jungle setting and the novelty of teenagers inside wildly different avatars. The humor came from discovery. This sequel expands the world, deserts, frozen mountains, new enemies. Visually, it feels bigger, more epic, but here's the difference. The first film had the advantage of surprise. The body swap concept was fresh, the dynamic was new, we didn't know what to expect. In the next level, the filmmakers had to evolve that concept, so they introduced generational swaps. Instead of just teens in opposite bodies, we get elderly characters navigating a video game world. And honestly, that twist is what saves the sequel from feeling repetitive. Now let's compare it to other adventure comedy franchises. It shares energy with films like Night at the Museum, where ordinary settings become chaotic playgrounds of fantasy. It also carries shades of classic treasure-hunting adventures like Raiders of the Lost Ark, especially in its artifact-driven plot and larger-than-life villain. But unlike Indiana Jones-style adventures, Jumanji leans heavily into self-aware comedy. It doesn't pretend to be gritty, it embraces absurdity. So what does this movie do better than its predecessor? Deeper emotional arcs, more layered performances, bigger environmental variety, and where does it fall slightly short? The structure feels familiar, the villain lacks depth, the surprise factor isn't as strong, but here's the key point. The next level isn't trying to reinvent the franchise, it's trying to strengthen it. And in many ways it succeeds, not by changing the rules completely, but by raising the emotional stakes. Because sometimes a sequel doesn't need to be revolutionary, it just needs to level up the heart. So how did Jumanji: The Next Level actually land with audiences and critics? Because making a fun sequel is one thing, proving it has staying power is another. Jumanji: The Next Level entered theaters with high expectations. The previous installment had been a surprise hit, many people thought it would flop, and instead it became a massive box office success. This time there was no surprise factor, people expected it to perform, and it did. The film dominated the holiday box office and proved that the modern Jumanji franchise wasn't a one-time success. Families showed up, fans returned. The chemistry of the cast was still a major draw. From an audience perspective, reactions were largely positive. Viewers loved the body swap performances, especially the way the actors mimicked each other. The generational humor resonated strongly. Many felt the sequel delivered exactly what they wanted: more adventure, more laughs, and slightly deeper emotional beats. But critics, that's where things got more divided. Some praised the cast's performances and the expanded world building. Others felt the film played it safe, entertaining, yes, but structurally similar to the first movie. The most common critique was familiarity. It didn't reinvent the formula, but here's the interesting part. For a franchise like Jumanji, familiarity might actually be part of the appeal. Audiences didn't necessarily want a complete overhaul. They wanted to revisit characters they enjoyed, with just enough evolution to keep things interesting. So is it underrated? Not exactly. Is it overrated? Also no. It sits in that rare space of being broadly liked, commercially successful, and slightly critic-proof. It's not revolutionary cinema. But it's effective blockbuster storytelling, and sometimes consistency is a victory in itself. So after all the chaos, the comedy, the character swaps, and the emotional turns, where does Jumanji, The Next Level, truly stand? Jumanji, The Next Level isn't trying to be groundbreaking cinema. It's trying to be something else, entertaining, heartfelt, and just self-aware enough to know exactly what it is. Let's start with the strengths. The ensemble chemistry is still the engine of this franchise. The body swap performances elevate what could have been repetitive into something genuinely fresh. Watching seasoned actors embody completely different personalities inside larger-than-life avatars adds layers of humor that feel surprisingly smart. The emotional undertones also deserve credit. Themes of insecurity, aging, reconciliation, and self-worth give the film more depth than most adventure comedies attempt. And visually, the expanded world building, from deserts to frozen peaks, makes this sequel feel bigger and more ambitious, but it's not flawless. The story structure follows a familiar path. The villain lacks complexity. And if you weren't invested in the first film, this one may feel like a continuation rather than a standalone experience. So who is this movie really for? It's for fans of high-energy adventure. It's for families looking for accessible, funny spectacle. It's for viewers who enjoy character-driven comedy wrapped inside blockbuster action. And most importantly, it's for anyone who connected with the idea that sometimes we feel stronger in imagined worlds than in our own. Because that's the heart of this film. Not leveling up your stats, not defeating the final boss, but realizing that the courage you admired in your avatar was yours all along. In the end, Jumanji, The Next Level may not reinvent the game, but it absolutely understands how to play it well. REVIWS. I've always had a soft spot for the original Jumanji, especially with Robin Williams delivering such a heartfelt and energetic performance. The visual effects, groundbreaking at the time, now carry a nostalgic charm, either adorably dated or timelessly whimsical, depending on your perspective. When the franchise was revived with Jumanji, Welcome to the Jungle, I initially assumed it would be an unnecessary reboot. To my surprise, it turned out to be an energetic and genuinely funny adventure featuring a charismatic cast. Its box office triumph practically guaranteed a follow-up, transforming the property into a full-fledged modern series. If the quality remains consistent, I wouldn't mind revisiting this world every few years. In the previous installment, the mystical game evolved into a console adventure, and the teens swore they were finished with it for good. Naturally, that promise doesn't last. A few years later, the group has grown older, and the cracks in their friendships are starting to show. When Spencer tinkers with the game again, he gets pulled back in, prompting his friends to follow. However, things don't go as planned this time. Jumanji, The Next Level, introduces a clever twist. Spencer's grandfather, Eddie Danny DeVito, and his estranged friend Milo Danny Glover are unexpectedly drawn into the game as well. The result? Body swaps that shuffle the avatars in amusing ways. Watching Dwayne Johnson channel DeVito's grumpy cadence is entertaining, but Awkwafina arguably steals the show with her spot-on impression. The humor largely stems from actors portraying other actors' personalities, a playful, almost theatrical game of identity juggling. The storyline follows a familiar video game logic. Retrieve a mystical artifact, dodge over-the-top villains, survive outrageous obstacles. Logic isn't really the point here, it's about spectacle and chemistry. From desert stampedes to perilous mountain climbs, the action sequences aim for thrills over innovation. While the antagonists feel somewhat underdeveloped, the real draw is the ensemble's comedic timing and camaraderie. Director Jake Kasdan reunites much of the cast and injects the sequel with a few new personalities to freshen things up. Though it doesn't reinvent the formula established in the prior film, it doesn't need to. The structure remains the same: limited lives, escalating challenges, and plenty of banter. Some moments may stretch a bit longer than necessary, but the lively performances keep things moving. Visually, the CGI is polished and immersive, exactly what you'd expect from a globetrotting fantasy adventure. The landscapes and creatures look convincing enough to sustain the illusion, which is essential for a film that leans so heavily on spectacle. This isn't award season material, nor does it pretend to be. But if you're not in the mood for something overly heavy or overly sentimental, it delivers breezy, crowd-pleasing entertainment. Fans of the modern Jumanji series will likely find this installment right up their alley. It knows exactly what it wants to be: fast-paced, funny, and unashamedly adventurous. Whether it surpasses its predecessor is a matter of personal taste, but as popcorn entertainment, it certainly gets the job done. There are also some welcome supporting turns from actors like Colin Hanks and Bebe Neuwirth, who add an extra layer of charm to the adventure. I'd happily suggest sitting down to watch Jumanji. The next level, whether it's a solo movie night or a family get-together. It's lively, humorous, and packed with moments that appeal to just about everyone. I may have approached this series a bit backward. Before seeing this installment, I hadn't watched any of the earlier entries, not even the 1995 classic led by Robin Williams. It's hard to believe more than 2 decades have passed since that original hit theaters. Even so, coming in fresh didn't dampen the experience. I found this sequel genuinely entertaining. One of the biggest highlights is watching performers like Dwayne Johnson, Kevin Hart, and Jack Black take on personalities completely different from their usual screen personas. Seeing them embody elderly characters trapped inside action hero avatars adds a clever comedic twist. They clearly put thought into capturing the mannerisms and voices of the characters they're channeling. Although Danny DeVito and Danny Glover don't dominate the screen in terms of physical presence, their influence is felt throughout thanks to how their in-game counterparts behave. As someone who's a bit older myself, I found one of the film's most touching lines comes near the end, when DeVito's character reflects on aging and tells his grandson that growing old is actually a blessing. That simple sentiment lingered with me long after the credits rolled, and for me, that moment alone justified the watch. The previous chapter, Jumanji, Welcome to the Jungle, turned out to be an unexpected box office success, especially considering it premiered alongside the massive Star Wars franchise. What made that film stand out was its ability to feel modern and inventive while still paying subtle respect to the original story. Attempting to extend that success with yet another sequel could have easily fallen flat. Fortunately, this follow-up builds on what audiences enjoyed before, delivering more humor, bigger set pieces, and a few fresh surprises. Directed by Jake Kasdan, known for films like Walk Hard, The Dewey Cox Story, and Bad Teacher, the movie continues the story 3 years after the friends first escaped the game. Spencer Gilpin, Alex Wolff, Anthony Fridge, Johnson Serdarius Blaine, Martha Capley, Morgan Turner, and Bethany Walker, Madison Iceman, have drifted into separate paths but plan a reunion in their hometown of Brantford. Struggling with self-doubt and relationship troubles, Spencer makes the risky decision to revisit the mysterious video game. When his friends arrive at his house, they encounter his grandfather Eddie, who is recuperating from surgery, and Eddie's estranged friend Milo. Soon enough, the malfunctioning console pulls several of them back into the world of Jumanji, though not everyone lands in the avatar they expect. Inside the game, familiar roles are reshuffled. Martha returns as Ruby Roundhouse, Karen Gillan, but Fridge ends up in Professor Shelley Oberon's body. Eddie becomes the confident Dr. Smolder Bravestone, and Milo takes on the role of Mouse Finbar. Guided once again by Nigel Billingsley, Rhys Darby, they learn that the land is suffering from a severe drought. Their mission: retrieve the enchanted falcon's heart, stolen by the ruthless Jurgen, the brutal Rory McCann, and restore balance before time runs out. The group must survive scorching desert landscapes, outrun stampeding creatures, and adapt to unexpected avatar swaps. Along the way, they reunite with Spencer, now inhabiting the agile thief Ming Fleetfoot, Aquafina. Meanwhile, Bethany seeks help from fellow former player Alex Vreek, Colin Hanks, in hopes of re-entering the game and aiding her friends. Packed with energetic action sequences, playful banter, and a steady stream of jokes, this sequel leans confidently into its strengths. While I might have enjoyed a few more tributes to the 1995 film, the movie ultimately stands on its own as a spirited adventure comedy. It may not reinvent the formula, but it certainly delivers an entertaining ride from start to finish. While searching for the magical fruit needed to restore Jumanji, Fridge and Martha stumble across a strange pool of shimmering green liquid that allows them to swap avatars. As the adventure continues, tension rises between Eddie and Milo. We learn their long-standing friendship fell apart after Milo secretly sold the diner they co-owned, pushing Eddie into an unwanted retirement. The team soon faces one of the film's more intense sequences, a series of crumbling rope bridges suspended high above a canyon, all while being chased by a troop of highly aggressive mandrills. Not long after, they reunite with Alex, once again inhabiting Jefferson, Seaplane McDonough, Nick Jonas, and Bethany, who is now controlling a brand new avatar, a black horse named Cyclone, whose thoughts only Finbar can interpret. After crossing the desert dunes, the group discovers another river filled with the same glowing green water. This time, Spencer, Bethany, and Fridge manage to return to their original in-game forms. Eddie and Milo, however, find themselves switched again, with Eddie taking Ming's form and Milo becoming Cyclone. Their mission is cut short when Jurgen the Brutal and his mercenaries capture them and haul them off to his fortress. Following a daring escape, Spencer pursues Jurgen aboard his airship while the others create a diversion. Though Jurgen initially overpowers him, Spencer recalls the villain's one vulnerability, the Jumanji berry. Using it incapacitates Jurgen, sending him falling to his doom. In a final act of teamwork, Eddie and Milo discover Cyclone's hidden wings and use them to rescue Spencer. Together, they return the Falcon's heart to the sun and call out Jumanji, breaking the drought and completing the game. The necklace is entrusted to Nigel for protection, but the emotional twist comes when Milo chooses to remain behind. It's revealed he is terminally ill, which explains his desire to fix his friendship with Eddie. The two reconcile before Milo soars away in his new form. Back in the real world, Spencer bonds with his grandfather over video games, while Eddie reopens his old diner, rediscovering a sense of purpose. The friends gather there to celebrate, but the story hints that Jumanji's influence may not be finished. A curious heater repairman, Lamorne Morris, examines the game console, and suddenly a stampede of ostriches charges past the diner. The supporting cast includes John Ross Bowie as Cavendish, Massey Ferlin as Switchblade, Marin Hinkle as Spencer's mother, Biben Newworth as Nora Shepard, and Dania Ramirez as Flame. Performance-wise, the returning cast remains solid. Johnson and Gillen handle the action with confidence, Black and Hart continue delivering much of the comedy, and DeVito and Glover inject genuine warmth into the story. Awkwafina proves to be a lively and welcome addition. That said, the film often feels like a near beat-for-beat replay of the previous installment. There's less emphasis on dangerous wildlife and jungle peril this time, with the comedy taking center stage instead. While some action scenes are thrilling and the visual effects are polished, the overall experience lacks the freshness that made the previous entry stand out. The first film, Jumanji. Welcome to the Jungle worked so well because it combined sharp humor, impressive CGI-driven set pieces, and a charismatic ensemble. One of its standout elements was Karen Gillan as Ruby Roundhouse, fierce, capable, and unforgettable. Gillan returns here in strong form, but even her presence can't entirely mask the sequel's sense of repetition. The core premise, once again, revolves around retrieving a mystical artifact from a fearsome warlord and saving Jumanji, a structure that feels overly familiar. The addition of Eddie and Milo as new players opens the door for generational humor, though many of the age-related jokes are stretched thin. The script doesn't quite reach the cleverness or inventiveness of its predecessor, and at times the humor feels simplistic. Visually, the movie remains impressive, particularly in 3D, but it leans heavily on CGI spectacle. Because each character has multiple extra lives, there's rarely a sense of real danger, which undercuts the suspense. We're never truly worried they won't succeed. Considering how much fun the previous film was, this sequel ends up feeling surprisingly average. Another trip back to Jumanji seems inevitable, and while the cast remains appealing, a stronger focus on story and sharper comedy would be welcome next time. This review assumes viewers are already familiar with the previous film and its characters. 2 years after their first adventure, the once tight-knit group has grown apart. When Spencer fails to show up for a reunion, his friends discover he has secretly reactivated the Jumanji game. Arriving at his house, they find his grumpy grandfather Eddie and Eddie's former partner Milo, but Spencer himself is nowhere to be found. They realize the only way to help their friend is to dive back into the game themselves. Naturally, things spiral in unexpected directions. Fridge and Martha don't land in the avatars they had before, Bethany gets left out entirely, and to everyone's surprise, Eddie and Milo find themselves pulled into the chaos. Before long, a non-playable character lays out their new mission. To escape, they must conquer a series of escalating challenges, and somewhere along the way, they still have to track down Spencer. Sequels can often feel unnecessary or underwhelming, but this one genuinely surprised me. It captures much of the charm and energy of the previous installment while introducing a clever twist. The same 4 in-game avatars return, yet they're now inhabited by completely different personalities from the real world. That switch keeps the dynamic feeling fresh instead of repetitive. Once the group re-enters the game, the pace barely slows down. Action sequences come one after another, delivering plenty of excitement alongside a steady stream of comedy. The visual effects are polished and convincing, and the ensemble cast clearly understands the tone the film is aiming for. Dwayne Johnson, Karen Gillan, Jack Black, and Kevin Hart once again portray the primary avatars, but this time with a fun spin that allows them to channel entirely new characters. Watching Johnson and Hart embody grumpy older men adds a layer of humor that works surprisingly well. Danny DeVito and Danny Glover, as Eddie and Milo in the real world, bring warmth and personality that elevate the emotional side of the story. Awkwafina joins the adventure as Ming Fleetfoot and fits right into the chaos, while Rory McCann provides a suitably intimidating presence as the villain, Jurgen the Brutal. The plot itself isn't overly complex, but it doesn't need to be. Its purpose is clear: create a high-energy adventure filled with laughs and spectacle. On that front, it succeeds. From start to finish, it's an entertaining ride, especially for anyone who enjoyed the previous film. This movie is wild, but in a way that's meant to be enjoyed rather than analyzed too deeply. My wife and I watched it a couple of years after seeing the first one, and it was easy to slip back into the rhythm of these characters. Once again, the main four are transported into digital bodies that don't match who they are in real life. One of them frequently reminds the others that none of it is real. They're inside a game, complete with 3 lives each, marked by the 3 dark bars on their arms. When someone dies, they dramatically fall from the sky and reappear moments later, brushing themselves off as if nothing happened. It's ridiculous, but that's part of the fun. I especially appreciated seeing 2 seasoned actors like Danny DeVito and Danny Glover sharing the screen. Their portrayal of former business partners who drifted apart adds a bit of heart beneath all the explosions and punchlines. Though the emotional thread isn't explored in great depth, it adds enough substance to ground the spectacle. Going into the movie, I had 2 big questions. How would the characters end up back in the game, and could the sequel measure up? The explanation for their return is admittedly a bit far-fetched. Spencer, feeling lost and dissatisfied, longs to become his heroic avatar again and repairs the broken console to do so. His loyal friends follow to bring him home. While that setup requires some suspension of disbelief, it works well enough to launch the story. In terms of quality, I'd say it comes close to matching its predecessor. Introducing new personalities into the familiar avatars keeps the formula from feeling stale. Kevin Hart and Jack Black, in particular, lean fully into the altered character traits and steal several scenes with their comedic timing. Like a good video game sequel, this installment keeps the core mechanics intact while layering in new elements to make things feel upgraded. Under the direction of Jake Kasdan, the film blends nostalgia with enough fresh ideas to justify its existence. The narrative structure remains straightforward and doesn't dive deeply into expanding the game's universe, but that simplicity keeps the pacing tight. At its heart, the story revolves around Eddie and Milo's fractured friendship. Beneath the humor and action, their journey becomes about confronting pride, regret, and the passage of time. The game acts as a strange but effective catalyst, pushing them toward reconciliation and offering a chance to mend what was broken. Overall, it may not reinvent the wheel, but it delivers exactly what it promises: an energetic, lighthearted adventure that's easy to enjoy, especially if you're in the right mood. Sometimes that's more than enough. Surprisingly, beneath all the spectacle and chaos, the screenplay quietly touches on aging and what it means to grow old in a world that seems increasingly built for the young. Placing elderly characters inside a universe that is both physically treacherous and symbolically unwelcoming creates some of the film's most intriguing moments. Much of this works thanks to the cast portraying the in-game avatars: Dwayne Johnson, Jack Black, Karen Gillan, and especially Kevin Hart. Hart, in particular, steals scenes with his hilarious imitation of Danny Glover's mannerisms, delivering a performance that's consistently entertaining. By contrast, the teenagers behind the avatars, played by Alex Wolff, Morgan Turner, Sir Darius Blaine, and Madison Iceman, feel slightly sidelined. They aren't weak performances, but their limited presence suggests a deliberate narrative choice. Even so, there's an eagerness for them to return to the game, especially when compared to the far more compelling exchanges between Glover and Danny DeVito. Whether inside the game or in the real world, Milo and Eddie's storyline finds a surprisingly heartfelt and satisfying conclusion. And for dedicated fans, the post-credits tease offers an exciting wink toward the franchise's future. As the title suggests, this installment truly feels like a new level. The avatars receive upgrades, though traces of their previous builds remain, while Jumanji, Welcome to the Jungle, 2017, leaned more heavily into adventure. This sequel shifts further toward comedy, without abandoning the wild animal encounters that have defined the property since Chris Van Allsburg's original 1980s book. The expanded cast allows for even more playful role reversals. Johnson transforms into a grumpy old man, Hart adopts the cadence of a soft-spoken senior, and Black channels the confidence of a teenage athlete. Awkwafina also gets to explore multiple personalities through her character Ming, a thief avatar within the game. The constant swapping of identities becomes one of the film's biggest strengths, generating some of its sharpest comedic beats. In many ways, this chapter plays like downloadable content, an expansion pack rather than a wholly new experience. There are fresh characters, new landscapes, and additional obstacles, but everything still revolves around the same objective: saving Jumanji. It attempts to deepen certain relationships, yet the emotional arcs ultimately land in familiar territory. The mission structure, while intentionally artificial because it exists within a game, occasionally feels like a narrative shortcut. The film sometimes leans too heavily on the "it's just a game" logic to justify questionable plot mechanics. This becomes particularly noticeable in moments where the rules seem flexible. A fight scene features one character, intentionally costing another a life, despite both having only two remaining, behaving as though the final consequence won't truly apply, even though the previous film established that death in the game carries real stakes. In another instance, a character who has carefully preserved all his lives ends up losing two in a trap he already understands, seemingly to level the playing field. These examples highlight how the game framework is occasionally treated more as a convenience than as a binding system. As a result, the sense of danger that once grounded the adventure feels diluted. Narratively, the story is less about the plot itself and more about creating opportunities for humor and spectacle. The villain, Jurgen the Brutal, played by Rory McCann, is serviceable but largely generic, a functional obstacle rather than a layered antagonist. That isn't necessarily a flaw, since the movie's true aim lies in its energetic action set pieces and comedic timing. Several sequences echo the spirit of classic adventure cinema, particularly the works of Indiana Jones. The perilous bridge scene with attacking monkeys is a clear homage. It's no coincidence that the director and co-writer is Jake Kasdan, son of Lawrence Kasdan, who penned Raiders of the Lost Ark. Visually, the film shines. The large-scale action moments, including a thrilling chase involving ostriches that carries a distinct Mad Max vibe, are executed with precision and flair. The blend of physical comedy, high-stakes action, and polished visual effects keeps the momentum alive even when the story feels formulaic. Ultimately, this installment doesn't reinvent the game, but it knows how to play it well. It may not level up in every department, yet it delivers enough laughs, heart, and spectacle to justify pressing continue. Everything in this film feels carefully organized, yet surprisingly light in tone. The characters inside the game, now more numerous than in the 2017 installment, fully embrace their exaggerated personalities, almost as if they are aware they exist purely for comedic effect. Flame Dania Ramirez, for instance, radiates a deliberately coded sensual confidence, while Knife Massey Ferlin embodies an over-the-top brutality straight out of a stereotypical villain mold, utterly incapable of straying from his wicked mission. Every element is crafted with a clear purpose, to build a self-contained universe that feels believable within its own rules. The action scenes inside the game world are noticeably extended compared to the previous adventure, giving the narrative an even stronger, video game quest, atmosphere. The performances, the screenplay, especially its playful humor, and the visual effects all work in harmony. None of the CGI feels excessive or decorative. Instead, it enhances the storytelling. Director Jake Kasdan's approach ensures the film functions as more than just spectacle. Even seemingly silly lines of dialogue take on a meta quality. When the characters announce their new abilities aloud, it mirrors how gamers often comment on their own gameplay while sitting beside friends. It's a subtle but clever layer of self-awareness. By the end, Jumanji, the next level expands beyond simple action comedy territory. It delivers an emotional resolution centered on a character who grows through the experience of the game. Interestingly, this character initially knows nothing about modern technology, yet becomes the most astonished and ultimately the most transformed by it. The film quietly suggests something poetic, that even an old-fashioned form of technology can provide connection, renewal, and even courage in the face of fears like loss or being forgotten. Jumanji represents not just physical survival, but emotional liberation. In many ways, it truly is a next level. The title itself emphasizes progression. The story structure remains familiar, and the core characters are largely the same, but the difficulty has increased. The players carry forward lessons learned from previous adventures, influencing how they now react and grow. Kasdan's two Jumanji films succeed because they merge cinema and gaming organically. The movie doesn't try to turn into a game, nor does it attempt to transform gaming into cinema. Instead, it finds a balance. It is film with a gamer's spirit. While it may not break new ground in audience interaction, it remains heartfelt and genuinely entertaining. Few franchises maintain steady quality across multiple entries, yet Jumanji manages to do just that. If you enjoyed the earlier films, chances are you will appreciate this one as well. There's a consistent blend of humor and adventure that defines the series. The visual effects are polished and immersive, adding to the thrill of the journey. The cast once again delivers strong performances, with each actor contributing something distinctive to the dynamic. Dwayne Johnson, in particular, brings surprising comedic timing, even for viewers who might not typically gravitate toward his performances. Although the overall formula feels familiar, the film remains engaging, which says a lot about the franchise's strength. The four teens introduced in Jumanji, Welcome to the Jungle, continue to evolve after their first adventure. Spencer, still struggling with insecurity, distances himself from his friends and secretly returns to the game seeking confidence. However, complications arise when his grandfather Eddie and Eddie's former business partner Milo are unexpectedly pulled into the adventure. This twist allows the avatars to be portrayed by entirely different personalities, including two characters who barely understand video games at all. The concept refreshes the dynamic without abandoning what worked before. The sequel introduces new abilities, new weaknesses, and additional playable characters, but it ultimately delivers another energetic ride filled with action and humor. Watching the established avatars interpret completely different personalities is one of the film's most enjoyable aspects. It's a smart expansion of the original concept. As always, Jumanji rewards its players, sometimes in touching and unexpected ways. The closing moments even offer a heartfelt nod to the original film. That said, on rewatch, the experience may not feel quite as fresh. Certain stretches drag slightly, and the humor does not always land as strongly as remembered. Still, despite minor pacing issues, the film remains a fun and sincere addition to a consistently enjoyable franchise. Even if the central premise feels just a touch more stretched this time around, Jumanji, The Next Level 2019 holds its own surprisingly well against its predecessor, and in a few moments, it arguably surpasses it. At its core, the movie's mission is simple: deliver a fun, crowd-friendly adventure, and for the most part, it succeeds. The body-swapping gimmick, which was already a highlight before, gets dialed up even further here. The added twists keep the concept feeling lively rather than repetitive. The returning cast once again proves how adept they are at embodying completely different personalities inside blockbuster avatars. Watching them slip in and out of these layered roles is still one of the franchise's biggest pleasures. The new additions to the ensemble turn out to be a genuine asset as well, especially the two veteran performers, whose limited screen time leaves a surprisingly strong impression. Humor runs steadily throughout the film. It rarely reaches gut-busting levels, but it's consistently amusing and occasionally quite charming. While the story doesn't strive for thematic depth or long-lasting emotional impact, it doesn't really need to. This is designed to be a glossy action comedy spectacle, and judged on those terms, it works. Sure, stronger thematic threads or a bit more nuance might have elevated it further, but that's not really the kind of ride it's aiming to be. One element that stands out more than expected is the emotional thread woven into the chaos. The strained relationship between the two older characters provides a surprisingly heartfelt core. Their dynamic adds warmth to an otherwise effects-heavy fantasy setting. The performances overall are deceptively impressive. It's no small feat to convincingly portray teenagers trapped inside the bodies of world-famous action stars, yet the cast commits fully to the illusion. Back in 2017, going into Jumanji, Welcome to the Jungle 2017, with modest expectations, turned out to be a pleasant surprise. It was energetic, self-aware, and far more entertaining than many anticipated. This sequel aims to replicate that magic by expanding the game concept into new environments and higher stakes. Director Jake Kasdan, alongside writers Jeff Pinkner and Scott Rosenberg, moves beyond the jungle to icy fortresses and towering landscapes, injecting variety into the visual palette. Cinematographer Julia Patos captures these settings with sweeping, high-altitude shots that enhance the sense of scale. The film continues to poke fun at video game tropes, from repetitive NPC dialogue loops to elaborate trap sequences and mid-air respawns after losing a life. Those touches keep the adventure playful. Action scenes are brisk and polished, blending slick choreography with crowd-pleasing one-liners. That said, not everything lands equally well. While the concept of older characters entering the game is amusing at first, the joke begins to thin out as similar gags are revisited. Some exchanges between the main avatars occasionally feel like variations of bits we've already seen. At times, the sequel resembles a hefty downloadable expansion rather than a fully fresh campaign. Still, it remains an easy, accessible blockbuster, It may not reach the highs of the year's most memorable films, but it delivers exactly what it promises. Lighthearted escapism, colorful action set pieces, and a couple of hours of reliable entertainment. And sometimes, that's more than enough. The original film, inspired by Chris Van Allsburg's novel Jumanji, felt fresh and inventive. That success naturally led to another chapter. While the 2017 revival managed to capture lightning in a bottle, this follow-up struggles to match that same spark. It isn't a total misfire, but it definitely doesn't level up from its predecessor. The returning cast from Welcome to the Jungle, Dwayne Johnson, Kevin Hart, Jack Black, and Karen Gillan, are back in action, joined this time by Danny DeVito, Danny Glover, and Awkwafina. The concept once again revolves around the video game world, with characters swapping avatars and personalities. On paper, it sounds like a clever way to keep things fresh. In practice, it's hit or miss. It doesn't help that while the actors are clearly talented, their attempts at portraying the personalities they're hosting don't always land convincingly. There's an improvement in the final stretch of the film, roughly the last 20 minutes, when the characters revert to the dynamic we're familiar with from the previous installment. The chemistry returns, and so does some of the charm. I'll admit, some of the body swap humor felt awkward to me, particularly when certain characters exaggerated traits that didn't translate comfortably on screen. Call me overly sensitive if you want, but a few of those moments felt forced rather than funny. That said, the film isn't without its strengths. The action scenes are energetic and well shot, even if they occasionally drag. The visuals are decent, and the set pieces, especially the rope bridge monkey chase, deliver spectacle. That particular sequence amusingly brought to mind the old P. Estwo Pitfall game. Still, the overall experience feels like a step down from the previous movie. The plot is straightforward to a fault, and while formulas can be comforting, there's a point where repetition begins to wear thin. The music choices deserve a nod. The soundtrack sprinkles in classics like Welcome to the Jungle by Guns N' Roses, Wicked Game by Chris Isaak, All in the Game by Tommy Edwards, and Big Mountain's Baby, I Love Your Way, which plays memorably over a boombox scene. These tracks add a layer of fun nostalgia that helps carry some scenes. Filming locations also add visual variety, spanning places like Calgary, Alberta, Georgia, New Mexico, and Hawaii. Fans who enjoy spotting real-world backdrops may find that aspect especially appealing. One odd creative decision is hearing Johnson's muscular avatar speak with DeVito's gruff, elderly cadence. It's amusing at first, but eventually becomes distracting. Meanwhile, Hart's performance channeling Glover fares a bit better and generates some genuine laughs. The movie even includes a post-credits scene teasing a sequel that might take place in the real world. Honestly, that idea sounds more intriguing than another round inside the same game. Let the kids carry their own standalone story next time. Growing up, the board game version of Jumanji already had enough chaos, dice rolls, jungle hazards, and endless rule checking. My sister always insisted on using the dog token, leaving me with the iron. I usually ended up as the banker, which meant doing math instead of having fun. But the cinematic version's constant body swapping and bizarre transformations would have probably grossed us out as kids. Imagine turning into animals or switching identities every time someone got wet. It feels more exhausting than exciting. To borrow and adapt an old sentiment, give me the classic version. The original formula worked because it felt unique. Now, after multiple installments leaning heavily on the same mechanics, it risks feeling overextended. Overall, this sequel is a serviceable, moderately entertaining continuation. The cast chemistry keeps it afloat, but the novelty has worn thin. A decent watch, but not quite the adventure it once was. And don't skip the gag reel. The bloopers might just be the most fun part of the whole journey. The sequel brings back several familiar faces, including Nick Jonas, Colin Hanks, and Rhys Darby, who once again steps into the role of the eccentric game guide. Joining the chaos this time are Awkwafina, Dania Ramirez, Beben Neuwirth, and the late Dorothy Steele, remembered by many for her role as one of the tribal elders in Black Panther. With new characters, fresh environments, a different quest, and an even heavier dose of slapstick humor, the next chapter expands the world while sticking closely to the blueprint that worked before. Though the premise feels somewhat recycled, and the returning avatars seem to have their personalities shuffled around for comedic effect, the film still manages to entertain. It just doesn't quite replicate the unexpected charm that made the previous installment such a pleasant surprise. Directed and co-written by Jake Kasdan, this entry wastes no time diving into the adventure. The addition of Danny DeVito and Danny Glover injects new comedic energy, especially as the primary cast gets to experiment with altered character dynamics. Interestingly, those personality swaps are far more amusing than many of the large-scale action sequences. That said, the film doesn't significantly deepen its characters. The stakes rarely feel genuine, and the overall trajectory is fairly easy to predict. While the high-budget set pieces look visually impressive, they don't necessarily elevate the emotional journey. Still, the ensemble knows exactly what kind of movie they're in, and they perform accordingly with enthusiasm and solid comedic timing. Overall, the film reuses the same winning ingredients of its predecessor and maintains its lighthearted, playful tone. It's a lively, big-screen spectacle designed purely for fun. Much like the previous movie, it's an enjoyable popcorn adventure, highly entertaining in the moment, even if it doesn't linger long afterward. As a sequel to the 2017 reboot, it does its job well. While I enjoyed that earlier film, this installment feels even more energetic and funnier at times. The new additions blend in seamlessly, and the chemistry between Dwayne Johnson and Kevin Hart once again steals the spotlight. Their back-and-forth banter is electric, and they elevate even the simplest scenes. Jack Black delivers another standout performance, while Karen Gillan adds balance and stability to the group dynamic. The performances are undoubtedly the highlight. However, I would have liked to see more focus on the real-world versions of the characters, as they feel slightly underdeveloped compared to before. The screenplay moves at a brisk pace, keeping the momentum alive with a steady mix of action and comedy. While the story becomes predictable midway through, it never drags or feels exhausting. There's always something happening, whether it's a punchline or an action beat, to keep the audience engaged. It's confidently directed and well executed, though a bit more character depth and a few stronger twists could have elevated it further. Even so, it's easy to recommend for fans of mainstream adventure films. Strap in, enjoy the ride, and don't overthink it. The goal here is pure entertainment, and on that front it delivers. This sequel understands why the reboot resonated with audiences and builds upon that momentum. It may not capture the exact same lightning-in-a-bottle magic, but it remains creative, energetic, and crowd-pleasing. The director leans into the absurdity rather than avoiding it, embracing exaggerated humor and over-the-top situations with full commitment. That self-awareness keeps the film feeling playful instead of repetitive. At its core, the franchise continues to thrive on the dynamic between its two biggest stars. Johnson and Hart's comedic rhythm feels effortless, and their synergy remains one of the strongest pillars of the series. Their interplay alone makes the adventure worthwhile and ensures the sequel earns its place in the franchise. Jack Black and Karen Gillan once again prove why this ensemble clicks when every member gets room to breathe. Black remains the secret weapon of the franchise, seamlessly jumping between personalities with sharp physical comedy and subtle vocal tweaks that make each switch feel intentional rather than gimmicky. Gillan, meanwhile, continues to strike a confident balance between athleticism and wit, grounding the madness with an emotional sincerity that keeps the adventure from spiraling into pure cartoon chaos. One of the smartest moves this sequel makes is reworking the body swap dynamic instead of simply recycling it. By reshuffling which characters inhabit which avatars, the film creates fresh comedic tension and gives the cast new opportunities to stretch. The humor feels earned because it grows from character contrast rather than repetition. It's familiar territory, sure, but with enough variation to justify the return trip. The addition of Nick Jonas and Awkwafina broadens the scope of the game's universe, reinforcing that Jumanji is far bigger and far more unpredictable than we've previously seen. Importantly, these newcomers inject new energy without stealing focus from the central quartet. The film understands that its heart lies in the chemistry between its leads. Ultimately, the next level works because it knows exactly what it is: a loud, fast-moving, family-friendly spectacle that prioritizes fun over reinvention. It may not eclipse the surprise success of the first reboot, but it comfortably earns its spot as a satisfying continuation. When the announcement first dropped that Jumanji was being reimagined for a 2017 release, the internet reaction was swift and skeptical. Many wondered why anyone would attempt to revisit a beloved family adventure so closely associated with Robin Williams. Turning a magical board game into a video game concept sounded, at best, like a risky modernization. And yet, nearly $1 billion at the global box office and strong word of mouth told a different story. Director Jake Kasdan and his charismatic cast demonstrated that revisiting the jungle wasn't sacrilege, it was an opportunity. Welcome to the Jungle surprised audiences with sharp comedic timing, clever role reversals, and genuine chemistry among Dwayne Johnson, Jack Black, Karen Gillan, and Kevin Hart. Success, of course, breeds sequels. This time around, the core team dives back into the dangerous digital wilderness. The biggest difference, the element of surprise, is gone. Where the previous film benefited from low expectations and unexpected charm, the next level arrives with audiences knowing exactly what kind of ride they're signing up for. The result feels more polished, but also more predictable. The sequel raises the stakes visually, boasting a larger budget and more elaborate set pieces. It also introduces Danny DeVito and Danny Glover into the mix, leading to some amusing impersonations from Johnson and Hart that become clear comedic highlights. Watching these actors mimic their veteran counterparts is undeniably entertaining and shows how much fun the cast is having. Still, the structure remains familiar: defeat the villainous NPC, restore order, escape the game. Because of this, some of the spontaneity that defined the first reboot feels slightly diluted. The laughs are there, the spectacle is bigger, and younger audiences will likely stay glued to the screen, but the sense of discovery has softened. That said, it's hard to fault the filmmakers entirely. Hollywood runs on the principle that if something works, you build on it. And to be fair, this sequel does deliver what fans enjoyed the first time around. The story picks up with the friends having gone their separate ways after their initial adventure. Returning home for the holidays, they reunite under less than ideal circumstances. Spencer, struggling with self-doubt and longing for the confidence he felt while inhabiting his heroic avatar, makes the risky decision to re-enter the game. Naturally, things don't go as planned. The character assignments are scrambled, alliances shift, and navigating the world of Jumanji becomes more complicated than before. While the film doesn't radically reinvent the formula, it doesn't necessarily need to. It provides reliable entertainment, energetic performances, and enough inventive twists to justify its existence. However, if the franchise hopes to continue beyond this installment, it may need to take bolder narrative risks. Lightning struck once unexpectedly, and struck again, albeit less forcefully, but asking audiences to be dazzled a third time without meaningful evolution could prove challenging. For now, though, Jumanji. The next level remains an enjoyable, chaotic return to a franchise that has become one of modern cinema's most surprising success stories. It appears that the game itself has somehow developed a few extra abilities since the last time we saw it, which feels a bit strange considering the console supposedly sat collecting dust in a basement for nearly a year. It's also the kind of outdated machine that clearly doesn't connect to the internet for surprise updates, so that added evolution is a little questionable. One enjoyable surprise in the film is the appearance of two veteran stars, Danny DeVito and Danny Glover. It's been quite a while since I've seen these icons of 80s cinema featured prominently on the big screen. Time has certainly caught up with them, but they still carry that familiar charm. That said, they're mostly present at the beginning and the end, since the majority of the story unfolds inside the game world itself. Overall, the movie is undeniably entertaining and works well as a family outing. It's not groundbreaking cinema by any means, especially given that it's a sequel, but it delivers enough fun to justify the ticket price. It's solid, even if it doesn't reinvent anything. This marks yet another collaboration between Dwayne, The Rock Johnson, and Kevin Hart. And yes, I'm counting Hobbs and Shaw, and their on-screen dynamic remains one of Hollywood's most reliable comedic pairings. At this rate, they could make 20 more movies together, and audiences would probably still show up. What makes this installment especially fun is watching Johnson channel Danny DeVito's grumpy energy, while Hart leans into his best Danny Glover impression. Strangely enough, that impersonation element might be my favorite aspect of the entire film, particularly because it pushes Hart away from simply playing his usual high-energy persona. As sequels go, this one is more than respectable. It builds upon the 2017 surprise hit where four teenagers are pulled into a video game version of Jumanji. Structurally, it follows a similar blueprint, but it succeeds thanks to its warmth, playful script, and strong performances from the core cast along with an expanded supporting lineup. Awkwafina's appearance was another pleasant surprise. After seeing her in the farewell, I've quickly become a fan of her work. That said, the film does feel somewhat repetitive at times. The action sequences are exciting, and there are a handful of genuinely funny moments delivered naturally by the cast, but about halfway through, the momentum dips a little. The challenges inside the game don't feel quite as daunting this time around, and the introduction of at least one new character doesn't entirely land. In some ways, it feels like a polished retread rather than a bold next step. The theater experience itself was slightly frustrating. There were around 15 minutes of ads, followed by several trailers, including Peter Rabbit 2, Trolls World Tour, Doolittle, and Star Wars. The Rise of Skywalker, and then, oddly enough, even more advertisements after the usual turn-off-your-phone reminder. Still, judging by how packed the 11 a.m. Wednesday screening was, the movie clearly has strong audience appeal and could easily dominate at the box office. While I enjoyed the 2017 revival, itself a continuation of the 1995 Robin Williams classic, inspired by Chris Van Allsburg's beloved children's book. I honestly didn't feel the franchise urgently needed another chapter. The previous film wrapped things up neatly, with its story of self-absorbed teens forced to grow through teamwork inside a jungle adventure world. Bringing Spencer back into the game, even if he's struggling emotionally, feels somewhat forced from a narrative standpoint. In the end, though, despite its flaws and familiarity, the film remains an enjoyable ride. It may not be essential viewing, but it's an easy recommendation for families looking for lighthearted escapism. From the opening moments of this 2019 sequel, it's obvious that the main character still has the support of his friends and family. Considering it was once again written and directed by the same team behind the 2017 film, I couldn't help but feel the premise could have been stronger. Instead of the game simply updating itself for another treasure quest, it might have been more compelling if he had accidentally been pulled back into Jumanji because the game was malfunctioning, forcing the others to dive in and rescue him before everything completely collapsed. Imagine if the broken game had caused chaotic glitches, characters randomly teleporting to bizarre and wildly different locations, NPCs suddenly becoming playable, strange ragdoll physics, warped textures, frozen character models, or even invisible barriers trapping players. That kind of unstable, corrupted game energy would have made much more sense given that the console was supposedly damaged. Unfortunately, we get almost none of that. The only noticeable glitch involves magical water that allows the players to swap avatars, and even that felt like a convenient shortcut. The group barely adjusts to inhabiting opposite personalities before everything resets. Martha Capley Morgan Turner, for example, becomes overly attached to her original avatar again, reluctant to explore anything new. It feels like regression rather than growth. When Anthony Fridge Johnson, Sir Darius Blaine, briefly switches into her avatar, there's real comedic and character potential there, but it's over almost immediately. I was genuinely hoping to see Ruby Roundhouse, Karen Gillan, evolve or behave differently this time around, but she ends up feeling very similar to her prior appearance. Not irritating, just predictable. As for the avatars inhabited by Grandpa Eddie Gilpin, Danny DeVito, I personally found that character exhausting. Eddie's constant bitterness and grumbling wore thin quickly. Even performers like Dwayne Johnson and Awkwafina, both excellent with comedic timing and impressions, couldn't make me fully invest in him. The diner squabbles between Eddie and Milo Walker, Danny Glover, dragged the pacing down. I would have preferred more focus on Milo's health concerns rather than repeated arguments about the past. Milo's confusion about the game and the modern world was, at least, easier to enjoy. Kevin Hart deserves recognition here. His portrayal of an elderly man is surprisingly convincing, especially considering how energetic his Mouse Finbar character was in the previous film. Jack Black once again steals scenes as Professor Shelley Oberon. His ability to shift mannerisms between portraying Bethany, Madison Iceman, and Fridge is impressively distinct. It almost feels like watching two completely different performances. I wasn't convinced that Alex Vreek, Colin Hanks, needed to return as Seaplane McDonough, Nick Jonas, since that narrative role might have made more sense for Spencer this time around. Still, the concept of a horse becoming a playable character was oddly creative, and I did enjoy that unexpected twist. The villains, however, feel underused. Jurgen the Brutal Rory McCann and Switchblade Massey Ferlin don't get nearly enough screen time to leave a lasting impression. Most of the real danger comes from wildlife rather than the antagonists themselves. The mandrill chase sequence on the bridge is tense and energetic, and the dune buggy escape, complete with charging ostriches, delivers chaotic fun. Even so, the character deaths lack the memorability of the previous film. There's nothing here that matches the outrageous cake explosion moment from before. The climax feels familiar, almost like a replay rather than an escalation. It doesn't quite raise the stakes in a meaningful way, and while the end credits tease another sequel, I'm personally ready to step away for now. Overall, this installment plays it too safe. The concept had room to go wilder and lean into the broken game angle, but instead it sticks closely to what worked before. It's not terrible, just not nearly as inventive as it could have been. I didn't even think the original needed a sequel, though I was curious enough to check this one out when it was announced. The story picks up after the first adventure, sending the four friends, along with a few family members, back into the game for more action-heavy escapades. It's entertaining, just not on the same level as its predecessor. It avoids feeling overtly preachy or agenda-driven, though I did notice a couple of small moments that could be interpreted that way, but it's hard to say if that was intentional. In the end, it's a decent follow-up that never quite levels up, For me, it's more of a cautious replay than a bold next stage. Overall, this is a loud, action-heavy adventure loaded with big spectacle and glossy visuals. There's plenty of eye-catching moments, and yes, Karen Gillan definitely stands out. And when the characters start switching bodies, you'll understand exactly what that means once you see it. It's harmless, turn-your-brain-off entertainment with big set pieces, light humor, and mostly convincing visual effects. In short, it's an easy Friday night escape movie. One of the more entertaining aspects is watching the cast essentially pull double duty. Since most of them are portraying different personalities inside their avatars, it becomes easier to appreciate the effort they're putting in. Seeing Dwayne Johnson attempt to channel Danny DeVito is oddly charming. He doesn't fully nail it, but he commits so enthusiastically that it's hard not to enjoy the effort. Later, Awkwafina steps into a similar role and genuinely surprised me. I hadn't seen much of her beyond a few animated projects and internet clips, but she handled it well. There are even a few moments that land emotionally, which caught me off guard. That said, the biggest weakness lies in the setup. The reason everyone is pulled back into the game feels flimsy at best. Yes, they return to rescue one of their friends, but his motivation for going back in the first place feels vague. The relationship drama that tries to simmer in the background doesn't add much either. It feels like a half-hearted subplot that no one really asked for. This sequel leans more heavily on character gimmicks than on storytelling. The film spends far too much time explaining, again and again, that the older characters are stuck inside a video game. The joke wears thin quickly. Many of the punchlines are obvious, and the humor doesn't always land. At over 2 hours, it feels stretched, probably a good 20–30 minutes longer than it needed to be. At times, I found myself disengaged. Some of the special effects look uneven by today's standards, and the narrative doesn't offer much that feels fresh. It often plays like a diluted rehash of the first film, except this time swapping in elderly characters for the fish-out-of-water routine, a joke that starts to lose steam fairly early on, especially after the helicopter sequence. The original movie felt tighter, funnier, and more focused. Here, the opening half hour is devoted almost entirely to repeatedly convincing the older men that they're inside a game, which becomes exhausting. I know many viewers enjoyed this installment, but it didn't resonate with me the same way. I loved the first film and found it genuinely hilarious. This one didn't make me laugh nearly as much. In particular, Johnson's portrayal of DeVito's character leaned too hard into cluelessness for my taste, and instead of being funny, it became mildly irritating. Looking back, the thin plot summary should have been a warning sign. Spencer returns to the game because he misses feeling confident in his avatar's body, a setup rooted in insecurity, but once the group follows to rescue him, that goal quickly gets overshadowed by a new quest involving returning a jewel to a village. It raises the question, if the rescue mission isn't the true focus, why frame the story around it at all? It feels like a convenient excuse to justify a sequel that perhaps didn't need to exist. The cast additions of Danny DeVito and Danny Glover are welcome, though it's disappointing that their screen time is relatively limited. They bring charm whenever they appear, but the film doesn't fully capitalize on their presence. In terms of spectacle, the movie delivers. There are thrilling action sequences and some impressive visuals, but what's missing is the heart and sense of purpose that elevated the first film. While it's not without its entertaining moments, this installment ultimately feels more mechanical than inspired. It's a 2-hour adventure, and you definitely feel that runtime. Given how straightforward and light the core storyline is, it's kind of surprising how much the script stretches things out. Jumanji, the next level, certainly has its entertaining moments and remains an easy watch, largely thanks to a charismatic cast that commits fully. But in the end, it can feel a little underdeveloped, somewhat uninspired, and arguably unnecessary as a continuation. That said, the next level is still a wildly entertaining sequel and a strong addition to the franchise. Growing up in the 90s, I have a deep affection for the original film led by Robin Williams, and I genuinely enjoyed the first Dwayne Johnson-led reboot. This follow-up, however, takes everything up a notch, bigger scale, stronger emotional beats, and even more humor. Bringing in 2 legendary actors, Danny Glover and Danny DeVito, was a brilliant move that elevated the film's charm. I grew up watching Danny Glover in classics like the Lethal Weapon series and the underrated Predator 2, so seeing him here was a treat. And Danny DeVito, who I remember fondly from comedies like Twins and Junior, alongside Arnold Schwarzenegger, adds his trademark energy and wit. Their presence adds a nostalgic layer and genuine heart to the adventure. The young crew from Jumanji, Welcome to the Jungle, returns, now slightly older and drifting apart. Spencer, feeling disconnected and uncertain about his place in the world, repairs the damaged Jumanji console and dives back into the game, longing to once again become the confident and heroic Dr. Bravestone. His friends follow to rescue him, only to discover that the rules have changed. Avatars are shuffled, personalities clash in unexpected bodies, and to make matters even more chaotic, Spencer's grandfather Eddie and his old friend Milo are pulled into the game as well. DeVito plays Eddie, while Glover portrays Milo, and watching them navigate new physical forms creates some of the film's funniest and most heartfelt moments. The chemistry between Dwayne Johnson, Kevin Hart, who delivers one of his funniest performances here, especially channeling Glover's slower, softer tone, Jack Black and Karen Gillan remains electric. Everyone appears to be having a blast, and that enthusiasm translates clearly to the screen. Visually, the movie delivers vibrant fantasy landscapes, exciting action sequences, and imaginative set pieces. But beyond the spectacle, there's a surprising emotional core. At its heart, the story explores aging, friendship, and second chances. The bond between two lifelong friends now in their 70s becomes the emotional anchor, reminding audiences about the value of growing older and cherishing the time we have. What works expands the established world in creative ways, strong visual effects, and adventurous set pieces, solid pacing for most of the runtime, good use of the ensemble, cast noticeable character growth, fresh humor, and recurring jokes that land well. Strong overall performances where it falls short. Could have leaned more into wild animal chaos, slightly less adventurous spark than expected, some convenient plot shortcuts. The final act feels rushed. The villain, once again, lacks real impact. Final verdict. Overall, Jumanji's return to the big screen is an enjoyable and fairly well-balanced blockbuster. It manages to make a familiar formula feel lively again through sharp dialogue, comedic timing, and a cast that understands how to play off each other. Despite its brisk momentum, the film mostly balances story, action, and comedy in a way that should satisfy general audiences. However, it doesn't quite stick the landing. The storytelling loses some strength toward the end, and the antagonist doesn't leave much of an impression. Even so, it's absolutely worth watching, especially on the big screen, where the effects and humor shine brightest. One small note of caution: families considering bringing younger viewers should be aware that the film contains a fair amount of strong language that younger audiences might pick up on. Director Jake Kasdan returns to helm this installment, successfully broadening the world introduced in the previous film. Spencer Alex Wolf, Martha Morgan Turner, Fridge Sir Darius Blaine, and Bethany Madison Iceman reunite, but this time the game throws unexpected twists their way. When Spencer reactivates the malfunctioning console, his friends follow, only to discover they're not inhabiting the same avatars as before, forcing them to adapt in hilarious and surprising ways. In the end, while not flawless, the next level delivers enough heart, humor, and spectacle to make it a worthy continuation of the modern Jumanji saga. This sequel takes everything audiences loved about the previous adventure and cleverly flips it on its head. By shaking up the character-avatar dynamic, the film gives its powerhouse cast room to stretch their comedic muscles in unexpected ways. Dwayne Johnson returns as the fearless Dr. Smolder Bravestone, while Kevin Hart once again appears as the compact zoologist Franklin Mouse Finbar, but this time, their performances take on entirely new personalities. Watching them channel different characters inside familiar avatars results in some of the movie's biggest laughs and most entertaining moments. Rather than simply repeating the formula of its predecessor, the story builds upon the groundwork established in Welcome to the Jungle while introducing brand new challenges. The game world expands dramatically, transporting players into scorching deserts, frozen mountain strongholds, and other unpredictable landscapes. The obstacles are tougher, the puzzles more elaborate, and the threats more intense. This escalation keeps the tension high and ensures the sequel feels like a genuine evolution instead of a replay. Beyond the action, the narrative also explores deeper emotional layers. We see more of the player's personal struggles and relationships outside the game, giving their in-game battles added meaning. The friendships are tested, insecurities resurface, and the bonds between characters grow stronger. That emotional core helps anchor the spectacle and keeps the franchise grounded in heart. A major highlight is the addition of comedy legends Danny DeVito and Danny Glover. They portray Spencer's grandfather Eddie and his longtime friend Milo, whose unexpected entry into the game leads to unforgettable comedic chaos. Seeing these older characters adapt to the high-energy, high-risk world of Jumanji while inhabiting heroic avatars creates a brilliant contrast. Their seasoned humor and heartfelt exchanges add warmth to the ensemble, and the younger cast's spot-on impersonations amplify the comedy. The film's conclusion opens intriguing possibilities for the franchise's future. A clever final twist hints that the boundaries between the game and reality may not be as secure as once thought. With the franchise's continued popularity and strong box office momentum, another chapter seems more than likely, and the next adventure could take the concept somewhere even wilder. Overall, this is a lively and action-packed sequel that successfully raises the stakes. With larger-scale challenges, inventive character swaps, and relentless adventure, it delivers thrills while staying true to the charm and camaraderie that define the series. Plot summary, spoiler-free. Following their earlier adventure, the group reunites when Spencer mysteriously returns to the game, but Jumanji isn't the same as before. The terrain is harsher, the dangers more unpredictable, and the rules have shifted. Spencer, Martha, Fridge, and Bethany find themselves navigating deserts, frozen peaks, and perilous territories filled with new enemies and bizarre obstacles. Identity swaps complicate matters further, forcing everyone to adapt quickly. As they battle their way through increasingly absurd challenges, they must rediscover the trust and teamwork that once saved them. What worked the returning cast, Dwayne Johnson, Kevin Hart, Jack Black, and Karen Gillan, display fantastic chemistry, expanded environments bring variety and fresh visual excitement. Identity switch comedy adds a clever twist. Bigger, more ambitious action sequences, emotional themes of friendship, family, and loyalty. Smart callbacks to earlier adventures, impressive visual effects, enhance the fantasy world. Fast-paced storytelling keeps momentum strong. What didn't work, some humor leans on repeated gags. The multi-location storyline can feel slightly crowded. Antagonists lack depth. Tonal shifts between comedy and danger don't always blend smoothly. Certain character developments feel compressed. Emotional scenes could have used more breathing room. A few predictable narrative turns. Best moments. Spoiler-free, discovering the new Avatar assignments, a chaotic desert escape involving sinking sand. Jack Black scene stealing. Physical comedy, the tense final battle high above ground, an inventive vehicle chase through wild terrain. Team-based puzzle solving under pressure, meaningful reconciliations between characters. Memorable quotes, "This was not part of the plan. We're stuck in this together again. It's just a game, right? Stand back. I've got it handled. Back into the jungle we go. Next level unlocked." Fun facts, the sequel expands the game world beyond jungles into deserts and icy regions. Several cast members performed demanding stunt sequences. The filmmakers focused heavily on the body swap concept to create new comedic energy. Although it may not be the strongest comedy or sequel released in 2019, Jumanji, The Next Level still delivers an entertaining and energetic cinematic experience. In several ways, it even builds upon the foundation laid by its predecessor. What continues to make this revived franchise so engaging is its clever use of situational humor, especially watching actors portray entirely different personalities trapped inside their in-game avatars. This time around, the film plays even more with that concept by reshuffling the characters in unexpected ways. The body swap dynamic creates plenty of comedic highlights, particularly when the cast leans fully into their exaggerated performances. The ensemble cast once again proves to be the franchise's biggest strength. Their portrayals feel more confident and refined compared to the previous installment. While some of the character arcs can feel a bit cheesy, there's enough genuine growth woven into the story to make it worthwhile. The script occasionally feels cluttered, and not every joke hits the mark, but there are more than enough laughs and adventurous set pieces to keep audiences invested. In the end, Jumanji, The Next Level isn't flawless, but it manages to slightly outshine the last film. If the series continues experimenting with its formula, there's potential for it to grow even stronger. My rating: 7.5/10, a sequel that had big shoes to fill in recent years. Hollywood has been overflowing with remakes and reboots. More often than not, they feel like diluted versions of beloved classics. A notable example is Ghostbusters, 2016, which many felt failed to recapture the spirit of the original. So when it was announced that the beloved 1995 film Jumanji, famously led by Robin Williams, would receive a modern reimagining, skepticism was understandable. However, Jumanji, Welcome to the Jungle surprised audiences by reinventing the concept rather than simply copying it. Instead of revisiting the magical board game, the story cleverly transformed Jumanji into a retro video game console. 4 teenagers were transported into the game world, forced to complete a quest in order to return home. The addition of video game mechanics, NPCs, cutscenes, character strengths and weaknesses, and limited lives gave the story a fresh twist. Combined with the humorous clash between the teenagers and their vastly different avatars, the result was both funny and inventive. Naturally, its box office success led to a sequel. Does The Next Level truly level up? While the sequel attempts to expand the adventure with new landscapes, desert environments, oases, and more dangerous wildlife, it doesn't feel as groundbreaking as the previous film. The core structure remains largely unchanged. Two new additions, portrayed by Danny DeVito and Danny Glover, bring a fresh layer of humor as aging former business partners who find themselves thrown into the chaos. One of the film's most entertaining elements comes from the character shuffle, especially watching Dwayne Johnson channel Danny DeVito's mannerisms. These role reversals provide some of the sequel's biggest laughs. However, beyond these amusing switches and new settings, the story doesn't introduce many truly innovative ideas.